When it comes to Archie Sonic, I think most people can agree that Sonic himself has an insane amount of plot armor and is also incredibly powerful, with a bunch of powers depending on who's writing him. However, I thought it'd be kind of fun to think of who could feasibly beat Sonic. And I don't mean beat him in one singular fight, but rather somebody who could permanently take that blue blur out. We're going to cover 5 characters whom I've thought of from least likely to most likely to get the job done, so let's get into it. To start off, we have Mammoth Mogull. Now, Mammoth Mogull, if you didn't already know, is an immortal mammoth with powers that come straight from chaos energy. He's been a warlord, he started a magic cult, and he even managed to kill Knuckles at one point. Now, with a resume like this, you'd think that he'd be placed higher, but time and time again, Mammoth Mogull just completely fails to take out Sonic. He did get close at one point when he managed to take control of Tails, Mina, and Mighty. He used their lives as blackmail and managed to get Sonic to break him out of prison, as well as steal a Chaos Emerald for him. After this though, Mammoth Mogull just became a casino owner and kind of took the position of Kingpin. He did end up placing some hits on Sonic, but ultimately nobody could take this guy out. So how exactly could Mammoth Mogull win if we've never seen it? To me, there are 3 main areas where he possibly could have won, if not for forces outside of his control. So the first one is that in one of his early appearances, we saw Mammoth Mogull supercharge himself into Master Mogull. This was a supercharged form that was able to go toe-to-toe with Supersonic, Turbo Tails, and Hyper Knuckles. And that alone is pretty impressive due to the fact that these are some characters who alone would be a force to be reckoned with. A lot of this seemed to be a bit of a stalemate during this fight, however, but who knows how long he could have held this form, and he might have been able to pull a close victory, if not for the fact that he ended up getting frozen inside of a giant emerald by Knuckles' family. The second area would be where Mammoth Mogull had basically become a god. Now, this guy was traveling across the multiverse, destroying planets pretty effortlessly. He did technically kill Sonic at one point here, however, it was a Sonic that was a weird Spider-Man inspired looking hedgehog thing. Interestingly though, Sonic wasn't the one to take Mammoth Mogull out here. Instead, Tails became a pseudo-chosen one, and with the combined power of a myriad of multiverse Tails, he managed to turn himself into Titan Tails, who then took Mammoth Mogull out. The last one, and probably shortest and least convoluted way that he could have done this, is just to wait Sonic out until he got older. Mogull is effectively immortal, and he even made it clear to Sonic at one point that he decided that he was going to give up trying to take him out. But his family would never be safe, as he would always be there. Had Mammoth Mogull stayed evil, I could see him feasibly maybe taking out an old version of Sonic. But, kind of interestingly, Mammoth Mogull ended up spending some introspective time here, and while thinking, he ended up moving to a more pacifist way of life. We'd learn in a distant future that he actually regretted a lot of his past decisions, and was now living a completely opposite life as a recluse hermit that was training Silver the Hedgehog. Next up is Miles, and honestly, I feel kind of weird placing this little guy over a literal immortal mammoth, but the main reason that he's not exactly at the bottom here is that Miles has shown a lot more competency than Mammoth Mogull in the realm of taking out Sonic, and I think they were actually really starting to write him towards being a new big bad villain, before things got rebooted of course. See, Miles was Tails from an evil anti-Mobius, and so he's kind of like what if Tails was still a genius, but was evil. Like Tails, Miles just cannot compete with Sonic's speed, and so in a one-to-one physical fight, he would 100% lose. However, this is a smart guy, and he also has some pretty decent leadership skills. He would end up rallying the anti-freedom fighters known as the Suppression Squad against Scourge, and he even managed to lock away both Scourge and Sonic in the anti-Mobius dimension. I feel as though with enough planning and resources, Miles could potentially take out Sonic, and unlike a lot of other villains, Miles has, like I mentioned before, some really good leadership skills, and he knows how to manipulate people to get what he wants. In a large part, actually, it's thanks to Miles that Scourge was ultimately removed from the picture and was taken out of his position as King of Anti-Mobius. Now, is he as strong as a godlike immortal mammoth? No, but he's definitely smarter than one, and that's where I think he really would have shined. Now, moving on, speaking of anti-Mobius, our next one here is Scourge. And yeah, Scourge on multiple occasions has gotten very close to beating Sonic. Unlike Sonic, Scourge does not see the best in other people. In fact, he's got really no interest in helping anyone other than himself. And that makes him a real foe to be reckoned with, considering that he has all of Sonic's powers, minus the plot armor of course, but does not use them in any way to benefit other people. Now, just to give you an example of this, there was an instance where Scourge, before being Scourge and was still anti-Sonic, so he wasn't green at this point, got mixed up with Sonic, and he ended up holding Sonic down on the ground and tried to beat his head in with a rock. This is something that I don't think Sonic would do even to like his biggest enemies, but this is something that Scourge would do without hesitation. This guy is ready to kill. He even managed to hold his own against Sonic and Shadow for a good little while before losing ground. Heck, he even defeated a whole room full of hedgehogs by going super, and he nearly took out Sonic, if not for the fact that the Freedom Fighters and Suppression Squad came in to buy Sonic some time, and then Sonic used Scourge's giant ego against him. Had it not been for Scourge's arrogance, he could have killed off Sonic right there and then. Heck, if not for Rouge, he probably would have just beaten in Sonic's head way earlier, or maybe even aided Dr. Finitivus in doing something evil beforehand. Thanks to his more aggressive behavior, this guy is capable of getting the upper hand in ways that Sonic would never even be able to think about. But he's very controlled by his emotions. He's fueled by that, and that is easily used against him. But had it not been for his emotions and his huge ego, he would definitely be something that could take Sonic out. Alright, next up is someone that I think most people could see coming from a mile away, and with really good reason. This guy is quite possibly one of the most intelligent beings to exist on Mobius, and he's hell-bent on destroying Sonic. Now, there are a few key factors working against his conquest here. The first being that Eggman, despite all of his resources, his vast Eggman empire, and his weapons of mass destruction, is egotistical to the point where it hinders his progress. Sonic can't simply be taken out by some kind of assassin robot. No. There needs to be multiple steps, and this robot needs to be a longtime childhood friend who is also a turtle. See, Eggman needs a certain level of flair to everything that he does, and he needs to be the one to personally do it himself. It cannot be someone else, because he needs to demonstrate his superiority to Sonic. This is something that Eggman has struggled a great deal with, and it's even pushed him to the brink of madness with how frequently he's lost against this blue blur. This leads us to Eggman's biggest issue in taking out Sonic, and that is that Sonic has become literally a conduit of chaos. After years of using Chaos Emerald's powers, Sonic has basically become protected by plot armor that's been ridden directly into the story, and that is Chaos Energy, which has made him nearly impossible to counter. Emphasis on the nearly. Eggman has gotten close on several occasions, especially when he realized this element of chaos that was in play and embraced it in himself. And in doing so, he achieved what is arguably one of his biggest victories of all time. Eggman managed to kill Sally and then rewrote the entire universe. This guy came incredibly close to conquering the whole entire world, but was yet again defeated by Sonic in the end. However, this would lead to the creation of Mecha Sally, and truthfully, I think using Mecha Sally, he could have finished off Sonic right here and then. Sonic was weakened, but Eggman is all about dramatics here, and he commanded Mecha Sally just to simply drop Sonic into the sky. A part of me thinks that he didn't want Mecha Sally to take out Sonic because it would be too easy, and he wanted this victory to be as stretched out as he could, and not something just tacked on a failure that he had just had. It's also important to remember that, like Mammoth Mogull, Eggman actually has defeated another version of Sonic in the past. See, what's kind of weird here is that this version of Eggman that we've been talking about is actually from another universe, in which he was originally known as Robo-Robotnik. This Robotnik conquered his version of Mobius and ended up coming to our version of Mobius in an attempt to conquer even more land. Now, of course, this has not worked out well for him at all since he got here, and of course the reason probably lies into that whole chaos energy thing, but he has at least shown that in the past, without any kind of godlike powers and just using his intellect, he could put an end to at least one version of Sonic once and for all. Now, last on our list is Enerjak. I honestly feel that if anyone had a chance of beating Sonic, it would be Enerjak, as unlike Eggman and Miles, he requires zero prep time. He doesn't need a super form like Scourge or Mammoth Mogull, and that's because he has the power of a god. Enerjak is actually kind of a confusing character, and so I just want to break him down really quickly because he's not one singular person, but rather he's this godlike entity living inside of the Chaos Force, and he uses various Echidna hosts. Now, through the comics, we've seen 3 Echidna hosts of Enerjak, and the main reason he's never defeated Sonic is that 2 of those hosts have never actually squared off against Sonic. However, I'd be willing to wager cash that each version of Enerjak that we've seen would be able to take out Sonic in a one-on-one fight. The first Enerjak that we're going to be talking about used Knuckles' distant uncle Dimitri as a host, and although he never got the chance to meet Sonic, based on his fights with Knuckles, I think that he could easily take out anyone, including Sonic, regardless of any Chaos Energy plot armor that they have. So we've seen this version of Enerjak teleport Knuckles to the moon, we've seen him send him to the bottom of the ocean, and we've also seen him take Knuckles apart on the atomic level. I don't care how much plot armor you have, but you're not surviving any of those things, my dude. The biggest thing working against this version of Enerjak was his ego. He believed himself to truly be this all-powerful being that could not be destroyed. And that left him ill-prepared to face off against Mammoth Mogull, who had the Sword of MacGuffin, the Sword of Acorn that managed to sever Enerjak's connection to Dimitri. The next version of Enerjak would actually be hosted by Knuckles, and due to Knuckles' natural, or I guess really artificial considering that he was augmented as a baby inside of an egg, connection to chaos energy, he's an absolute force to be reckoned with. This variation of Enerjak showed off similar abilities such as being able to rearrange things on the atomic level, such as when he removed the cybernetics from the Echidna people, and he also demonstrated an incredible ability to fight anyone who went against him, including Supersonic, who was charged by the Master Emerald. Enerjak may have actually won here if not for the fact that Knuckles' father Locke paid the ultimate sacrifice to sever Enerjak from Knuckles. Heck, if you want more proof that this version of Enerjak was truly busted, there's no better example than the Dark Future. Now, in this Dark Mobius alternate timeline, we would find Mobius 30 years into the future, and in this world, Knuckles had never been severed from Enerjak, and honestly, it's really grim. The world is in dystopian disarray, there is only a small force fighting against Enerjak, and through all these years, Enerjak has only grown in strength. He hasn't slowed down a slight bit in his old age. Not only that, but he has the power to turn everyone he defeats into these metallic prelates, while keeping their corpses as trophies. And who do we find in his trophy room? Well, it's none other than Sonic himself, who Enerjak managed to defeat. It's only honestly through the combined efforts of Silver and Knuckles' daughter Jani-Ca that they managed to use the Sword of Acorn once again to destroy Enerjak, which is kind of embarrassing that it was used twice. This also led to that good version of Enerjak that I mentioned before, which is really funnily known as Janijak. Somehow Jani-Ca managed to keep control of herself and have all of the powers of Enerjak, which honestly makes her really scary to me, because although she seems to be good right now in this one moment where we saw her, there is a lot of uncertainty of what somebody would do with that level of power. And if those dark influences of Enerjak are just even slightly there whispering to her, she could really become something dangerous. But ultimately, we never got to see more of her, sadly. So that there are 5 characters who I think would probably be the most likely ones in Archie to take Sonic out. At least those are the ones that I could come up with. Now, do you agree with my choices, or did I miss anyone? I would love to know that in the comments. And of course, as always, if you feel like this video earned any kind of like or subscribe, that's always really appreciated and it goes a really long way. However, as always, I am not your boss, I can't tell you what to do, and at the end of the day, I just hope that you have a good one.